This really is outrageous. It is scandalous. Now, the right to protest is one of the most basic, fundamental democratic rights. Our ancestors fought for it at huge cost and huge sacrifice. Now, since the genocide began, of course, the genocide committed against the Palestinian people by the Israeli state, facilitated, enabled by Western states, including our government, huge numbers of people across Britain, as they have across the world, have marched to stop the genocide. Now, there's been a deliberate and systematic campaign to demonize these protests. And the reality, of course, completely different. People of all faiths and none united with one aim: to stop the genocide and to stop the long-standing brutal oppression of the Palestinian people. But it has taken a pretty grim turn, a very sinister turn. And there's no better person to speak about that than, of course, Ben Jamal, who is the director of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which is of course, the absolutely fundamental movement which has been driving the struggle for Palestinian liberation in Britain for so long. Ben, how are you? Great to see you, firstly. Thanks for joining us.
You too.
Okay, so let's just set the scene. There was a protest organised for the 18th of January, and there is a protest, just to be clear, we'll talk about that. And it was going to start at the BBC for a very basic reason, as I think people who engage with this channel are fully aware. The BBC's role in promoting pro-Israel narratives did quite a bit of work on this. People didn't see it, but very important protest. What's going on? Just explain the context of what's happening.
Yeah, thanks, Owen. And look, it's worth saying something maybe first of all about, obviously people will be aware, we have been marching as part of our broader campaign to bring an end to a genocide, but also to end the wider repression of the Palestinian people that is decades long, but intensifying all of our activities since October 2023. Part of that are the national marches. We're now on, I almost lose count, I think this march planned for January the 18th will be, I think, the 24th national march. We, from the beginning, have taken the view, we always, not every protest group does this, but we always liaise with the police, speak to the police about our plans for marching. There's a reason for that, because we are bringing huge numbers of people to the streets of London. At the maximum, we've had over 1 million people at the demonstrations, but each demonstration has had at least 100,000 people. So you need to make sure you've got the roads clear. Sometimes the police will legitimately say to us, where you're planning to go, are you aware there's a big carnival happening, etc., etc. So you negotiate on. And then when we choose our routes, we choose routes that have political resonance. But we also know that people don't want to be consistently marching on exactly the same route. So we have a variety of ways in which we try to go somewhere that has political resonance. Now, for this particular march, for some time we've wanted to march again from the BBC. We've done it twice since October. The last time was in February 2024. It's a place that has political resonance. But as you've said, there's another reason, which is there is growing concern about the role of the BBC. And that's been highlighted by the work that you've done recently as well, Amplified. And we've had BBC journalists speaking out about the complicity of the BBC, its bias, its failure to address the realities of what's happening. So actually, for the last march we did, which was November the 30th, we went to the police with two options in mind. One was a march from the BBC to Whitehall. The other was an alternative start location to go to Whitehall. The police said to us, you are choosing to march, if you go down from the BBC, right through the commercial heart of London on the busiest shopping day of the year. It's going to cause huge disruption. So we agreed, actually, we had an alternative. We'll shift it, but we want to go from the BBC in January. And the police have been putting blockages on this route. They've always been reluctant to allow us this route. We secured an agreement with the police. They went away, consulted, came back and said, we agree. And we agreed the date of January the 18th. We said, and I've got an email trail on this, we said to the police, we will announce this on November the 30th. So we're going to march from the BBC to Whitehall on November the 30th. Shortly before Christmas, that was all announced. People began plans. Some people booked their train travel in advance, make sure they got their coaches sorted, etc. These are huge operations. Shortly before Christmas, the police met with us and said, would you consider an alternative route? We said, this is ridiculous. Why? We've had representations from figures within the Jewish community, a couple of rabbis, the chief rabbi, that this will cause major disruption to a synagogue that is not on the route of the march. We don't march past a synagogue. There's no route that we've marched on that goes directly adjacent to a synagogue. But there is a synagogue north of the BBC, about 500 meters tucked away on a side street. And they said that your marches have caused cumulative disruption to that synagogue. Now, it's a ridiculous argument. We said, look, we've marched on this route on October the 14th, 2023, and on February the 3rd, 2024. By what stretch of the imagination is that cumulative disruption if we're on the march for the third time? But what's the argument? What you know, and it is a matter of public record, there has been no threat to any synagogue arising from any of our marches. And this is part of a narrative, a political narrative that has been used to try to demonize the marches, that they're hate marches, that they're anti-Semitic in nature. We came back for conversations with the police this week, and we were informed yesterday that they are going to impose orders that prevent us from marching from the BBC. But worse than that, what they have effectively said is their intention is that they will place a prohibition on pro-Palestine marches taking place or demonstrations taking place at the BBC on a Saturday, henceforward, because that would cause serious disruption to the Jewish community. So the message from the police is they're going to use the powers available to them under the Public Order Act to stop people demonstrating in support of Palestinian rights outside of the BBC on a Saturday, which is, as you've said, absolutely outrageous.
It was wild. It's completely wild. I mean, what that does in practice is stop any major demonstration outside the BBC, because Saturday, for very good reasons, as people can understand, is the day you have national demonstrations. People are less likely to be in work and so on. I mean, and this is conflation. This is deliberate, an attempt to just basically the police say, well, actually, we're going to accept the arguments made by right-wing media outlets, politicians, various descriptions, that a protest which includes Jewish activists is somehow a threat or menace to Jewish people, when there is no evidence for that. No evidence whatsoever.
Yeah, and when we met, and in the various meetings we've had with the police, it's not the first time this has come up. And what they said to us is, look, there is concern about harassment. So we've said, look, what is the evidence of any threat to a synagogue? And they said, well, there doesn't have to be actual evidence that a synagogue's been attacked or there are plans to attack or there's any physical threat. It's about harassment. So we said, so what's the evidence that people in synagogues, traveling to synagogues, have been harassed? And their answer is, well, we don't have to provide actual evidence. If they tell us they feel unsafe, right, that's good enough. Now, there's two things to say about this that we've said. First of all, as you've said, on every demonstration, there are hundreds, sometimes thousands of Jewish people marching, many of them in an organized Jewish bloc.
And people, just to be clear, people see them wear their kippah. They're people who are very...
And they have a big banner
celebrating their Jewishness.
Yeah, saying, Jewish blocs. Some of them have signs. Many of them are Holocaust survivors.
Yeah.
We've had somebody from the Jewish bloc speaking at virtually every demonstration. They are always warmly welcomed. That's been entirely ignored, and effectively what the police and those across the political establishment who've contributed to this sort of demonization of the marches and saying they're unsafe spaces for Jews are doing is invisibilizing those people. That's the first thing. The second thing is that this is about a sort of conflation of the Jewish community and support for what Israel is doing. Now, the point that we have made to the police is those who are lobbying you on this, and unfortunately, I have to cite, one of the figures the police have cited is the chief rabbi. They said he has expressed his concerns. I said, look, you have to engage with the fact that the chief rabbi, from the very beginning, has established and tried to tie the Jewish community from an overtly pro-Israel position. He has publicly condemned calls for a ceasefire. He has described the actions of the IDF as noble. He has described what Israel is doing in a speech he made in a synagogue as the most decent thing that a nation can do.
And to add to that, to also say what he said, he described the IDF soldiers as our heroic soldiers.
Yeah.
So it's very explicit. I mean, and this is really important because there's a Jewish bloc which is, well, furious about what's happening about this, and so many Jewish people who are speaking out, including those speaking out, for example, against the Board of Deputies who keep conflating. I mean, they keep speaking out to condemn things which have nothing to do with anything other than the state of Israel, its actions. So, yeah, I mean, it's the politics of the chief rabbi and what he said. I mean, when he's talking about our heroic soldiers, I mean, there's nothing more to be added to that, really, is there?
Yeah. And look, there's another part of the argument here. The police have said to us, and I had the same experience when I gave evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee. It was put to me, do you accept that there may be Jewish people who are fearful of these marches? And I said two things. I said, look, first of all, if someone says I feel intimidated and harassed, the normal process is to listen to that, but then look at if there's any evidence. And there's a very dangerous line we're going down now. To give some examples, we've had incidents, for example, of plates, pottery plates, made by designs from children in Gaza and then made by children in the UK that were on display in a hospital, Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, displaying signs of Palestinian identity, etc., removed from the hospital on the grounds of complaints from a very pernicious organization called UK Lawyers for Israel, that this was unsettling and harassing to Jewish patients who were disturbed by this. We've had an incident in 2023 when the police visited the home of somebody who had a Palestine flag in his window because complaints had been made saying that Jewish residents of that town were harassed by the display of the Palestinian flag. Your viewers will remember that Suella Braverman said that we should look with concern at displays of the Palestinian flag. It could be seen as an act of hostility, as harassing. So where do you draw the line on this? So first of all, if someone says, I feel harassed by something, you have to say, well, do you have good reasons? And actually, I would say those arguments actually rest on a foundation of anti-Palestinian racism. We saw the worst example of this in an article from Melanie Phillips in the Jewish Chronicle this week that said, actually, if in any shape or form you are part of advocating for the Palestinian cause, then you are an anti-Semite. So
and people should see, people might think, oh, come on, this is an exaggeration of what she said. That's essentially the headline he just read out, by the way.
That's exactly what she said. Now, the other thing that I think you say is this, look, is it possible there are some Jewish people who feel fearful and intimidated of this marches? Of course, that's a possibility. What I've said to the police and what I said to the Home Affairs Select Committee is, look, if you tell people there are hundreds of thousands of people marching through the streets of London, they all hate you. They all want to kill you. They're chanting genocidal slogans. They're all thugs. They're all motivated by barbaric intentions. Then people might be fearful. If what you say is there are thousands of people marching, they're calling for a ceasefire, they're campaigning for Palestinian rights, amongst them are thousands of Jewish people, then you might disagree. You might take a view, I disagree with their political intentions, but you might have a different view as to actually, do they have intentions to harm and to kill me? And part, I would say, of the responsibility of the police, if they are being lobbied by people saying people are fearful, to say, well, what are the grounds for your fear? Let's address them and let's see if they are based in fact. Otherwise, where we are heading, first of all, as I've said, we're heading to a place where the police are saying we're going to use powers to prevent those who want to demonstrate for Palestinian rights on the only viable day for national protest. Saturday, Sunday is extremely difficult to organize a national protest. They can't go to the BBC, but we're heading to a place where the police are saying on any route you want to choose for a march or a protest, we have to check, first of all, on what are the views of pro-Israel groups in the country on whether they feel harassed by your presence in that area.
I just recommend to people who haven't seen it, I interviewed earlier this year a Jewish academic called Nara Milanich, who is at Columbia University, and it was about the campus protests and the way that they were portrayed in the United States. And she made such a brilliant argument about the demarcation that's important between feelings of extreme discomfort and threats of actual harm. And she goes into detail to unpick this. I also recommend people watch Israelism, which is a film. I interviewed the main protagonist in it, I guess, Simone Zimmerman, one of the co-founders of If Not Now, a Jewish peace movement in solidarity with the Palestinian people in the United States. It starts with her crying visibly earlier. She grew up in a very Zionist family, weeping over pro-Palestinian demonstrations. And she talks about that kind of weaponization, because obviously she's gone on this huge journey, that weaponization of trauma and how that is cynically adopted by those cheerleaders of the Israeli state. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen?
Well, look, we've been in this situation before. We hope the police see sense, but the reality is we are going to have to create a body of political pressure, and that work is already beginning. We intend to march on the 18th. We will be marching on the 18th. We need as many people as possible to join us. These demonstrations have been overwhelmingly peaceful. You've been in them, Owen. You know that. You know the body of people that come from all walks of life. From
it's like a family day out. I think people who haven't gone on them, it's like a family day out. You know, it's kids, it's elderly people, it's people of all faiths and non.
Exactly. And part of that is we have managed to make them orderly. But there is another aspect of that. Numerous times I've had people saying to me, Palestinians, members of the Arabic-speaking community and others, this is the place at the moment where I can come and both manifest my deep concern at what is going on, but feel in a space of community with other people. And we use this. We're not naive about what you achieve from a march. This is also about galvanizing people to take action. So we are going to be on the streets of London. We are calling on the police to reverse their intentions on this, to see sense. We need a body of political pressure. We are speaking to all our allies in Parliament. I would say every civil society group that is concerned, not just about the rights of the Palestinians, but about democratic rights to protest, should be weighing into this. We need as many people as possible. We need everybody of prominence who cares about this issue to be on the streets of London on the 18th. And we intend to hold, again, a peaceful, orderly march. But I want to say one final thing, Owen, which is we're not going to allow this to distract us from the fundamental issue here. Why do we continue to march? I get asked this question. Why do you keep doing? You've made your point. Why do you have to keep marching? And the answer is simple, because the genocide is continuing, but it's not just continuing, it's intensifying. In a 4-day period, while people in the UK were celebrating Christmas, Israel killed over 200 people. A stat was revealed during that period of time that escaped most people's attention. The biggest age group of those who've been killed in Gaza is people aged 5 to 9. People should contemplate that. During this period, we've seen a major assault, further assault on the hospital infrastructure. All of the functioning hospitals in the north of Gaza are now removed. The detention of the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital. Amnesty International saying he is one of 300 health workers detained. They suspect all of them are being subject to torture and ill treatment. And in the midst of all of this, not a comment on any of these incidents from our political leadership, from David Lammy, from Keir Starmer. We are almost 1 year since the ICJ confirmed the plausibility of the case that this is a genocide. We all know it's a genocide. That's why people continue to march and take action. This is all an attempt to find a way to make us go away and to end and repress solidarity for the Palestinian people in the UK. It's not going to happen. We call on everyone to be on the streets with us. Our intention is to hold an orderly march. We're going to ask and put pressure on the Metropolitan Police to reverse this decision.
Amen to that. And just on that again, I mean, it's worth emphasizing the arrest rate at Palestine demonstrations is lower than it is at Glastonbury Music Festival, which is why it led the likes of Suella Braverman to then start claiming absurdly that the reason for that is because the police are under the thumb of Islamists and other Islamophobic attacks. The hold the police under the hold, I mean, it's just, a complete absurdity. And I'm glad we just ended there by emphasizing what this is all really about. It's about the genocide which our governments are facilitating and our media organizations are facilitating, enabled by our governments, facilitated by the likes of the BBC, their overtly racist coverage, their erasure of the crime of historic proportions that's been committed with the facilitation of the British government and Western governments in general. They are playing a pivotal role in what's happening, which is why the protest needs to be starting at the BBC. But just finally, thanks so much for everything the emotional labor you've had to put in. over this period. And obviously the Palestine Solidarity Campaign for such a long time fighting against the brutal oppression of the Palestinian people, which obviously goes back many generations, which Britain is up to its neck in, but obviously playing the pivotal role here in fighting this genocide. Spread the word, everyone. Get the video out. Press like and subscribe. Leave comments. All that's good for the algorithm. Gets more people getting angry about this. We need to make noise. We need to fight this. But Ben, thank you so much for everything you do.
Thanks, Simon.